بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين أما بعد فقد قال عز وجل بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم عما يتساءلون عن النبأ العظيم الذي هم فيه مختلفون كلا سيعلمون ثم كلا سيعلمون صدق الله العظيم. So as you can see, a little bit more color, but as the surahs are longer at the beginning, so we decided to do Surah Juz Amma. So the surahs are generally a lot longer. So because they're longer, so for example Surah Naba has 40 verses, so it's very difficult to understand 40 verses all at once. So the Mufassirin, the scholars of Tafseer, they divide it, all of them divide it into at least 4 sections. So they divide the whole of Surah Naba, all 40 verses, into at least 4 different sections. And some of them take it further and split it into 6 sections. So generally the more we divide it, the easier it is to understand. So the 6 sections which are there, the reason you've got the blue at the top, the whole surah, then underneath there's what all scholars agree on, the 4 divisions, and then underneath there's 2 more in each section. So there's 6 altogether. And then this helps us have an outline of the surah, what we can expect. So we can study one thing today, and then we can expect, we know what to expect next week and what we're going to move on to. So that's one thing. And then generally just the overview, the surah starts with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He describes the mushrikeen and what they do. And then the mushrikeen, they're doing certain things which, they are doubting certain things which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So as a result of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He then spends 10 verses explaining His ability to do everything. That's the next 10 verses. And then after that, the whole disagreement was on whether Allah can resurrect everybody. So then Allah then speaks about the Day of Judgment. So that's what we're going to discuss today, inshallah. And starting from the beginning, so Surah Amma, as we know, is in the last juz of the Quran. So the reason we choose this is because many of us, we know this, and if we were to learn parts of the Quran, we'll usually start from here. So we'll start from the end and come backwards. So most of us will know the most of Juz Amma, as you know, this is what we learn the most often. And also the themes that we have, they're very, very relevant. They benefit us a lot, and we have a lot of reoccurring themes. And the main reason we come is so that we have the ability to connect directly to the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is one of the key benefits that we get, that on a regular basis, as opposed to having a random talk on a random topic. So on Wednesdays we have a random talk on a random topic, but nowadays what we have is the opportunity to sit and directly from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we take some lessons. So it's very direct. So now the reason I've given these sheets is because the whole surah is on there. So today what we're going to study, the first 20 verses, they're all on there. So we've got 1 to 5, then 6 to 16, and then the last 4, and that's what we'll try and go through today. So that way we can look through the Arabic if we know the surah. If we don't know the surah, we've got the English there. So we know that directly from the word of Allah we'll be taking some kind of benefit. So this is the main reason why this is given out like that. So to begin, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He starts the Amma yatasa'alun. Now what are they asking one another about? Amma what? So yatasa'alun, what are they asking one another about? So obviously this has some kind of background, it has some kind of context to it. So to understand the context, what we realize is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's describing when He used to reveal the Quran to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and there used to be so many big things in the Quran, talking about ba'tha, that the fact that after everybody dies they will be resurrected, talking about the day of Qiyamah, talking about Jannah, talking about Jahannam, talking about the reality of the world and the reality of the idols which they're worshipping. So many realities given in the Quran. Now when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to come with this, he used to do tilawah of these verses, he used to explain this to the people around him. Now when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to explain this, they then used to ask each other about, what is he talking about? What is he on about? It's saying that after we die we're going to come back to life, we're going to have a day of judgment, we're going to be taken to task, some of us are going to be rewarded and some of us are going to be punished. So this mockery. Now when we ask a question, there's 2 ways of asking the question. One very simple way is that I want to know the answer. So because I want to know the answer, you ask the question. But yatasa'alun here, most scholars agree that the reason they're asking is not to find out the answer. They're not really curious about whether or not the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is being truthful. Well, they're trying to take the mick. They're saying that, what on earth is he on about? What's he on about? How can he claim that we're all going to come back to life? How can he claim that after death there's some kind of extra life that we're going to live into? So that's what they're saying. So when they say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then depicts this whole first 5 verses is just how Allah depicts the scene. That they're just sitting there and they're asking each other about the reality of Qiyamah, such a big thing. And is that really what they're doing? So this is the first verse which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes. And even in the narrations we find that the muhaddithin, they bring a hadith regarding this, and they explain how it is that we understand this verse. So, for example, there's one narration where Abu Salih, he narrates from Ibn Abbas. So Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu says that كانت قريش تجلس لما نزل القرآن, that the Quraysh used to sit with one another. So used to be close to each other, and they used to be sitting and discussing. And when the Qur'an would be revealed, then they would ask one another that, what was he talking about here? So he'd ask this kind of question. So this is the way the Quraysh would ask one another. So Allah depicts that kind of scene. And this is the narrations that we find. Another narration is which refers to the next verses which come. So the next verse, عَنِ النَّبَإِ الْعَظِيمِ. So already we've established that they're asking about something. And generally most scholars agree it's either about the things which are in the Qur'an or resurrection itself. That's what it's talking about. However, here Allah then describes the thing they're asking about is Naba al-Azim. Now Naba is a kind of very important piece of information, a very important news. It's not your normal average news. You wouldn't call it Naba. If I was to say that, if I was to tell you the football score of yesterday, or I was to tell you the cricket score of this morning, for most people that's really not that important. For some people that might be very important, but for the majority of us it's really not that relevant. If I was to tell you what time a shop is going to close, on a Sunday, most of us know that anyway. It's really not that relevant. So we wouldn't call that a Naba. It's not important enough. Naba has two conditions. Number one, it's a very big event. It's something which is very, very effective for everybody. It has a relevance to everybody. And the second thing with Naba is that it requires a response. So for example, if I was to say that the mosque is on fire, then all of us, we wouldn't just sit here talking about the fact that the mosque is on fire. We would immediately do something. So now when Allah says Naba al-Azim, the first verse is yatasa'alun. They're just sitting there talking about it, asking, taking the mick, essentially. Now Allah says that they're taking the mick out of Naba al-Azim, something which requires them to actually do something. They need to stop worshipping the idols. They need to take the message of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam quite seriously. But instead of taking it seriously, they're just sitting there making a mockery of it. Now as we see, a mockery of deen was made right from the start of deen, right from the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was never something which, nowadays when people make a mockery of deen, it's not a new thing. Sometimes we come across it and think, sometimes we get a bit overexcited. And in different ways, we see some people go to very extreme levels and they start, going and violently protesting, which is completely unnecessary. But even ourselves, sometimes we get very angry, we get very agitated. That why is so and so getting, in essence, mockery of deen has always taken place, as we know, throughout the time, from the time the Prophet ﷺ came with the message and with the Quran, all the way from him. All the way in the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, people left Islam, and as we know, as soon as the Prophet ﷺ passed away, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu had to wage war on the people that had left Islam and were defaming Islam. So mockery of Islam always took place, but the response was not to go around and always have big rallies and to defame them and to respond to their accusations. It's to ignore them a lot of the time. And especially in the time when the Crusades were writing their khutbahs and the people they were encouraging people to come and do crusades against the Muslims. Now the Muslims didn't retaliate to their allegations. They didn't bother writing refutations on the accusations which they were making. This is one thing we notice. Even here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He shows that He takes offense to this, but the Muslims didn't start responding to this directly. So this is something we'll see a lot of people with different allegations. So we don't have to individually respond to each thing, but we as Muslims, we have to, in a holistic way, we have to show that we understand and we respond by our character in many ways. Naba al-Azim. So Naba, we already know, means a big thing. Azim, Allah brings Azim, means great as well. So if something's already big, this is to show the emphasis of how big the thing is. So we see that mockery is taking place of such a great thing, something which is so important to them, and they need to sort themselves out, but they're just sitting there making a mockery. So this is how Allah depicts the scene. الَّذِي هُمْ فِيهِ مُخْتَلِفُونَ. And this is, the narrations here say that Qatada, where he says, هُوَ الْبَعْث بَعْدَ الْمَوْتِ, that the thing which is discussed is ba'th, is resurrection after death. This is the key thing which is discussed here. Because obviously that has a lot of consequences, and most importantly, that requires us to do something. That's why a lot of people like to deny that. And even nowadays we see people deny anything happening after death, because it gives a lot of peace, and it means that there's nothing to worry about after death. So this is one of the reasons that we find. And even while they were discussing this, so at the beginning they were discussing, even while they were discussing, some of them agreed, as we know, some of them became Muslims. So some of them, they ended up understanding as a result of the discussion. And many of them fihi mukhtalifun. Some of them became Muslim and many of them stayed as kuffar. And even while they were kuffar, they weren't really sure. Mukhtalif can also mean to have ikhtilaf within yourself. Within yourself to be unsure. That I myself am not really sure what I'm meant to be doing at this time. And this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes many of them, that they weren't really sure about what they're meant to be doing. And then this is the scene which is depicted. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He kind of gives the warning. He gives the threat. He says, كَلَّا سَيَعْلَمُونَ. That very soon these people, they'll find out. That very soon these people, they'll start understanding the reality of what they're doing. So, كَلَّا سَيَعْلَمُونَ. Then, ثُمَّ كَلَّا سَيَعْلَمُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala repeats it and gives emphasis. So now, كَلَّا, very often it can be meant to stop. That, stop doing this evil thing that you're doing. كَلَّا also can be in the affirmative. That definitely this will happen. So now, definitely they need to stop. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He draws attention. It's a word used to draw attention of the person who's listening. And He explains that very soon they'll find out. What will they find out? So the people who are doing taqdeeb of this, the people who refuse to... Now the whole debate started because people didn't appreciate the concept of the hereafter. So now the people who deny that, obviously when they die, they will find out. This is what Allah explains. And many of them may understand even before that. Allah may open their mind to understand before that. ثُمَّ كَلَّا سَيَعْلَمُونَ. Allah gives emphasis on this twice. And this... now these 5 verses, as you can see, we've separated them. So this is the end of the first section. The first section was just the fact that Allah talks about the mushrikeen, and then He gives a wa'id, He gives a warning that these people will soon find out. And now, even if you're reading in Arabic, now we'll read عَمَّا يَتَسَاءَلُونَ عَنِ النَّبَإِ الْعَظِيمِ الَّذِي هُمْ فِيهِ مُخْتَلِفُونَ كَلَّا سَيَعْلَمُونَ ثُمَّ كَلَّا سَيَعْلَمُونَ. Now we notice the change. أَلَمْ نَجْعَلِ الْأَرْضَ مِهَادًا وَالْجِبَالَ أَوْتَادًا وَخَلَقْنَاكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا. So we notice even in the way it sounds. So here's لون عن النبأ فيه مختلفون سيعلمون and all moon. And now the whole rhyme pattern changes, and the topic here changes as well. Now the topic changes. If you look at the translation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts talking about His greatness. He starts talking how He created so many things in the world. Now how is this relevant? Many of us may be wondering, how is that relevant? So Allah is saying that the mushrikeen are asking and doing this. How is that relevant to... How is to talk about the greatness of Allah now relevant to this? So this is how we find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is proving that He as a being is capable of doing everything. He can do. Now they're asking about what? The ba'tha, resurrection. They're asking about Jannah and Jahannam being real. They're asking about Allah's ability to give everyone death and then bring them back to life. Now Allah's going to prove that He's got ability to do a lot better than that, a lot more than that. And because when a human thinks of things, we very often think within our own capability. What can I do? What do I have the ability to do? And very often that's not very much. But Allah proves that throughout time, and even right now, He does so many things. So this is the general concept of the next verses. And then this is where you see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He discusses these verses. So He starts with أَلَمْ نَجْعَلِ الْأَرْضَ مِهَادًا. Very often it's a comparison to our own lives. So mihad generally can mean cradle. Mahad is a cradle. Generally something you use for comfort in the world. أَلَمْ نَجْعَلِ الْأَرْضَ. We made the earth a means of comfort. Now when we think of comfort, what do we make for ourselves? We make a bed. Sometimes we make a house if we're very, very talented. And most of the time we just buy a house and we live in that house, and that's our means of comfort. And that's what we think is the main way of getting comfort. But all of this would be impossible without the earth in the first place. And the way Allah makes it firm, and the way Allah makes it possible to put a house on the earth, and the way Allah generally, He makes it possible to even lie down on the earth and sleep on the earth. So many benefits of the earth. So now we get happy when we make a bed, because we can, there's one thing that we've achieved. But Allah, and we get happy when we make a house. Allah's made the whole earth, the whole earth for every single country in the world is such a massive thing which is done. So our ability can never be compared to Allah's ability. And this is the problem which caused the question in the first place. Why were they asking each other? Because they doubted Allah's ability. They doubted Allah doing something which they thought was very big and hard. So now Allah will prove His own power in these different ways. That's the first thing. And the second, the verse after this, verse 7, وَالْجِبَالَ أَوْتَادًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have we not made the mountains as awtad, as pegs? So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes that now, especially in those times, when you thought of pegs, you generally think of tents. Nowadays maybe not so much, but pegs were the main things which should hold a tent up without tent. So now he's comparing that the mushrikeen, when they would go, obviously whenever they'd go for war, even travelling, nowadays we don't need tents that much, because if you're travelling from here even to the other side of the world, we go on a plane, we don't need to take anything with us. But in those days, even if you're travelling from here maybe to London, you'd be expected to camp one night at least. So tents were very important. Nowadays we may not understand this as much, but because tents were very important to them, they would pitch a tent when they needed to do something. Now Allah describes what kind of pegs He uses. And what are the pegs Allah uses? Allah uses mountains as pegs. So now such a massive difference that we have a little tent and we get so excited about it. And if a tent has a partition in the middle, we get so we think it's amazing. But Allah makes such the entire mountain and takes it as a peg for the earth. And that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's again comparison for us. And that's how we appreciate how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does that. And so these are general. We look outside, we see the greatness of Allah. Then if we look more specifically, Allah in verse 8, He says, وَخَلَقْنَاكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا. That He talks more specifically about the human being. That even we ourselves as individuals, we didn't create females, and the females didn't create males. Allah created both of them. Our whole existence is based on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creating us. So this shows how much dependence we as human beings have on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Eternally, not just for the earth, not just for the things which is created, but even our existence in its first place, our bodies and the way that we interact with each other, all of this. And obviously, having pairs is essential for human life to survive. So having both of them, all of this is something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasizes here. And then the next verse which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He explains, وَجَعَلْنَا نَوْمَكُمْ سُبَاتًا. And this is something very important, that when we go to sleep at night, or whenever we go to sleep, we have subat. We feel cut off from everything. It's a very relaxed environment. We get to refresh ourselves. There's a lot of benefits in naum, but sleep itself, imagine if we didn't have that opportunity. Now many people do find it difficult to sleep. And if we don't find it difficult to sleep, that's a great blessing from Allah. Many people, they don't sleep on time, and that causes a lot of problems in their lives. Many people don't wake up on time. So there's all these things. So now if we have a good sleep pattern and sleep on time, which is not very difficult to establish, it's up to us ourselves as individuals. But many a time, many people, as we know, with insomnia, they find it very difficult to sleep on time. So they lie down for hours and they can't go to sleep. And then they go to the doctors and get sleeping pills and all of these problems. But alhamdulillah, if Allah saves us from that, it's such a great blessing. And our life depends on it. Our life is so dependent on... And now Allah describes it as subat. Subat means to be cut off. Now literally when we sleep, we get cut off from everything. Like if we're asleep, then usually when we're alive and when we're awake, now our phones, especially the younger generation, our phones are always in our hands. So we think that the world depends on us. If we don't respond to that WhatsApp message, everyone's going to fall apart. But we go to sleep for 8 hours, and all that 8 hours, the world doesn't collapse, despite the fact we're completely cut off from the world. It's a mini death. Like when we die, people are going to have to make do without us. As sad as it sounds, we're going to leave other people behind, and they're going to survive without us. They're not going to think for the rest of their lives, oh, I wish he was here. Maybe a couple of days, and then they'll get over it. Even if somebody, we may think of the person who we have the most attraction to in our life, and if that person died, within a few, maximum couple of weeks, we'd completely forget about it. So this is very important, because what's the original point of the surah? An-Naba al-Azim, the ba'tha, resurrection. So now death is going to happen, and after that death, you're going to have this ba'tha. So this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us, that Allah gives us this sleep, and He cuts us off, and then He gives us a longer sleep, and we'll be completely cut off from it. It's a reality which is going to come to us. And then Allah carries on, وَجَعَلْنَا اللَّيْلَ لِبَاسًا. The night overall, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes it as libas, something which covers us, something when it's dark, it's very easy to sleep. And gives us, imagine if there was no difference between the day and the night. It'd be very difficult for us to know, the tartib of a day, the order of a day, when the shops are open, when we go out, when we work, during light time, during the times of day. And Allah brings them both together. وَجَعَلْنَا اللَّيْلَ لِبَاسًا وَجَعَلْنَا النَّهَارَ مَعَاشًا. So ayah 10 and 11. So layl is made as libas, generally for sleeping, or generally for caring for other people, generally being inside. And وَجَعَلْنَا النَّهَارَ مَعَاشًا. And the day has been made for ma'ash, for doing our activities. So now there's a distinction. Now obviously in our lifestyle, many of us may work throughout the night, especially in our culture, especially in the Indian culture. Everyone works throughout the night. The taxi driver is always working throughout the night. The takeaway people are working usually until 1 o'clock, which is why Tarawih happens so late. So generally people work more at the night. They start work at 5, 6 o'clock, and then they finish. And many of us may work throughout the night. But despite that, what we see is that there's a tartib in our life, there's an order in our life because of the night and day. Even if we don't use the day for working, and even if we don't use the night for sleeping, there's still an order in our life. We know when to sleep because of the fact that it's light. We know so many things are ordered because of this blessing of Allah. So these are just things which are relevant to our general lifestyle. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the last one, وَبَنَيْنَا فَوْقَكُمْ سَبْعًا شِدَادًا, He describes that we've created above you. Again, this is relevant to us. We make houses or we make a big building and we get really excited. Imagine, it's such a small building and there's all these pillars and I forgot what they're called, those things that go across the middle. All these things to support the ceiling. And if they weren't there, the ceiling would fall in. Allah makes the whole 7 skies on top of each other. Again, Allah can do so much compared to what we can do. So this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains this. وَبَنِينَا فَوْقَهُمْ سَبْعًا شِدَادًا وَجَعَلْنَا سِرَاجًا وَهَّاجًا. The sun as well, the blessing of the sun. And وَأَنزَلْنَا مِنَ الْمُؤْصِرَاتِ مَاءً ثَجَّاجًا. And mu'sirat, clouds which are squeezed. Asir is juice, so squeezed fruit. So the clouds which are so full that the wind squeezes, the winds gets the clouds together, and when they're heavy enough, they get heavy, then they start raining. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains the system here. لِنُخْرِجَ بِهِ حَبًّا وَنَبَاتًا وَجَنَّاتٍ أَلْفَافًا. And then very easily he explains the benefits of the water. So the water comes down. لِنُخْرِجَ بِهِ حَبًّا وَنَبَاتًا. As a result, we have hab and nabat. Hab is generally referred to as those things which are like, for example, your flour, rice, or in grains and crops. And generally when we go on the motorway and we see crops, they will be referred to as hab. Nabat is more vegetation, so the grass and the trees and bushes and greenery. So that will be nabat. So all of this from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessing. The whole life. I mean, cows have to eat grass, for example. And it's something which is referred to as nabat. So all of these, our whole life depends on these kind of things. Jannatin alfafa, this is the first thing, dense gardens. Like rainforests and gardens which are very, very dense, that you can't really see where the roots are, where a separate plant is growing. If you go to a rainforest, you can't always, if you look at it's a very bushy area, you can't always see which bush is separate from another, but everything entangles into another. This is what is referred to as wajannatin alfafa, very, very dense kind of place that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. Now, that's the end of this part. All of that was the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is very, very relevant for many reasons. Number one is that we can be gracious. We can be grateful for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can know why that Allah has given us all of these things, and constantly we forget that we have so many blessings. We forget how dependent we are on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how independent He is of us. And also, in terms of the surah, it proves the point that Allah can do all these things. So to do ba'tha is so much easier. Allah created you وَخَلَقْنَاكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا. We created you in the first place. So to bring you back to life is even easier. So this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He explains these things. Then to finish off for today, in the next 4 verses, إِنَّ يَوْمَ الْفَصْلِ كَانَ مِيقَاتًا يَوْمَ يُنْفَخُ فِي الصُّورِ فَتَأْتُونَ أَفْوَاجًا. Now this is back to the point. So Allah, He asked the question. These people are asking the question about ba'tha. Then after these people ask the question about ba'tha, after these people ask the question about ba'tha, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He talks about the greatness of Allah and how He's achieved so many things. Then finally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now He comes back to the main point. So the main point what's the main point of this surah? The resurrection after the ba'tha. MashaAllah. Somebody's paying attention. So to come back alive after death is the main point of this surah. That's the main point Allah's focusing on. So now they say yatasa'alun, they mock it. They say no, it's not going to happen. Allah says I can do this and this, it will definitely happen. And then we come back to the main point. Inna yawm al-fasl. Yawm al-fasl, as in the day of separation. Truth and falsehood will be separated on that day. And also fasl means to separate. What else will be separated on that day? A person himself, individually, he'll be separated from evil as well. So if he had doubts in his mind and he wasn't sure, then on the day of fasl, he will be 100% sure. And there'll be no doubt remaining on that day. And another thing, also this is a slightly more scary thing for ourselves, fasl is we'll be cut off from everyone. We'll be cut off even from a mother, will even let go of a child who's just been born. So every relation that we had in the world, we'll be completely cut off from it. So this is another way, Yawmul Fasl. We'll be completely alone on that day. So this is something for us to appreciate. Inna Yawmul Fasl kana miqata. Miqat, appointed. It's like an appointment. And it's fixed. It's like, imagine, literally, like if we have an appointment in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months with somebody to meet them for whatever reason, for a dentist or a doctor appointment, then we will appreciate that that's going to happen at that time and in that place. Now it's the same with the Yawm al-Fasl. That's going to happen, it's fixed on a fixed time and in a fixed place, and it's definitely going to happen. So this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains. يَوْمَ يُنْفَخُ فِي الصُّورِ فَتَأْتُونَ أَفْوَاجًا. Yunfakh fi الصُّور, very famous. The angel's name is, so Mikael, Israfil, Jibrail, Israel. Which one? Israfil. Very good. So Israfil, most scholars agree on this. Some scholars claim that there's a consensus on this, that his name is Israfil. So he'll blow in the horn, and then most scholars also agree that the whole horn will be blown twice. So the first time it's blown, everything will be finished. And the second time, everybody will be ready and resurrected. So first time, so again, the horn itself indicates on Ba'tha. Everything destroyed, and then second blow of the horn, everybody will be ready and resurrected for the Yawm al-Fasl. So this is how the horn is. So يَوْمَ يُنْفَخُ فِي الصُّورِ فَتَأْتُونَ أَفْوَاجًا. Now ta'tun, change. Before Allah was saying أَمَّا يَتَسَاءَلُونَ عَنِ النَّبِيِّ, He's talking about the kuffar, يَتَسَاءَلُونَ, they asking. Now Allah saying فَتَأْتُونَ, now He's directly addressing us. تَأْتُونَ, for all, you will all come. By addressing the mushrikeen, you will all come. And all of you will come afwaj, in big groups, in multitudes. Yeah. So all of you will come in big groups. And this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes that day. And now Allah is addressing, now Allah is making it very clear that He's addressing every single one of us. Now when we read in the Quran, He addresses us. That فَتَأْتُونَ أَفْوَاجًا, you will come, and on the day of Qiyamah you will have to come and face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the key thing that we learn. And then وَفُتِحَتِ السَّمَاءُ فَكَانَتْ أَبْوَابًا وَسُيِّرَتِ الْجِبَالُ فَكَانَتْ سَرَابًا. These last two verses, in the last 10 verses, when we were speaking about the greatness of Allah, we mentioned two things. One of them was the 7 heavens, and we also mentioned the mountains. So the mountains were pegs, and the 7 heavens Allah has created. Now Allah mentions both of them again. وَفُتِحَتِ السَّمَاءُ. Those 7 heavens which Allah has created, all of them on the day of Qiyamah will be split open. And this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He describes His greatness. And again, He's proving the point of how He can do whatever He wants with whatever He wants. The authority He has. He doesn't have to, if we create a very nice house, we don't destroy it. We want to keep it forever. And live there, because it's so nice, it's so valuable to us, so much effort went into it. Allah makes something so amazing, which we could never dream of making, but then it will split as well. It will all, and if you were to think of something which is hard to move, what would you think of? We've already mentioned the word mountains. Very hard to move. So the one thing we think of is mountains, the hardest thing to move. Now Allah says وَسُيِّرَتْ. That suyira, like just put into motion, just made to fly, literally. Suyirat al-jibal fakanat saraba. And these, to the extent that now if we thought of a mountain, we could never imagine a mountain moving.
Big earthquakes, even in the big earthquakes in Japan, they are still there.
Absolutely. So mountains never move. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will make them come out, and then they will become, and fakanat sarab. Sarab means a mirage. So if you're in the desert and you look far away, what do you see, Rashida? Water, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even though there's no water there. If you go on a train track and you look down, you see them joining. So these are all mirages, so they're not real. This is the same. So when we see the mountains coming up, everybody will think that this is not real. But Allah will make the mountains come out even on that day. So everything will be destroyed.
That's happened in Italy for some years back.
Oh yeah. No. So this is the overall of this is where just before half the surah. And we'll stop here inshallah. But again, the outline of the surah is given at the front. And just to recap, and this way, because obviously it's a very long surah, but we appreciate. And I'm trying to make things very simple, because I've noticed that a lot of our audience do not have English as a first language. So I try and speak a little bit slower. I naturally speak really fast. I speak too fast. So I try and speak a bit slower, and inshallah we keep it very basic as well. No need for complications, because when Allah says things in the Quran, the way Allah says it is the best way. So if you repeat it and just translate it, but just make sure we know what the message of this surah is. And we're going through a lot quicker than we used to go through in the other. We used to do a lot of depth there. So I'm trying to make it a lot simpler, very basic, very, very basic. And inshallah, if you just keep this in mind, you can go through the translation, and all of the messages, inshallah, will come back through Qiyamah. So I make that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives me and all of us the ability to understand.